How can we develop strong relationships with our kids? Why was Michael Hill such an inspirational jeweler? And what rules should everyone know in business relationships? If you'd like to find out, then you are in the right place. Welcome to Between Views. I'm your host, Alec Koski. This podcast aims to cast light on and connect you with inspirational people, identify them as potential mentors in your journey, and share their stories and wisdom with the world. My hope is that this podcast contains some information that is vital in your journey. In this episode, we converse with Prest for the final time about developing strong relationships in family and business. We learn about his mentors, and we discuss the value of reading autobiography. Speaking of products, we are doing another giveaway. This is your final chance. We have up for grabs 3 tins of 3 Fingers Surf Zinc. All you need to do is follow both Between Views and 3 Fingers Surf Zinc. Leave a 5-star review and follow on Spotify. And go ahead and like our collaborative post. You will get a bonus point if you share it to your story. Just before we get started, if you enjoy listening to this episode, I'd like to invite you to leave a star rating on whichever service you found us and the opportunity to join the Between Views Patreon community, which has just opened for access to exclusive weekly ideas and content. This is the best way that you can support the podcast. Thanks for sticking around. We hope you enjoy it. Cool. Moving into the final part of the podcast now, which one thing about Between Views is it's sitting with mentors, it's sitting with teachers, it's sitting with inspirational people with stories. It's all of that and more. And I've been very inspired listening to your story so far today, but you didn't get to where you are without having some people inspire you. I think we mirror people we are inspired by. I think our mentors, whoever they become or whatever they are, even moments, we reflect them and become them. And that's why I chose to sit with all of these impressive people, because I'm like, if I can hang out with these guys even just for an hour and a half, imagine the things I'll learn. And you've done that with people too. Who are they?
Sure. I'll give you a saying before I get to the mentors. If there's 3 dickheads in the room and you walk into that room, you will become that 4th dickhead. Or on the flip side, if there's 3 millionaires in the room and you walk into that room and hang around those guys, you will become that successful person. So I started with the company that I worked for 25 years was Michael Hill Jeweler. So multinational, Canada, the US, New Zealand, Australia. I think there'd be 480 stores worldwide, turns over $500 million a year annually.
Wow.
So I had some really solid mentors within that group, because it was a family. I wouldn't say it's a family run business, but when they were in Australia and I started, there was only 20 stores. So now in Australia, there was 180 stores in Australia. So it was still really small. So you got to know the CEO really well, and you actually got to know Michael Hill. So Michael Hill's a real person, still alive today. He'd have to be in his 80s. A couple of really good books that he wrote, if you want to read something, is Michael Hill's autobiography called Come Out Fighting. It was really easy read, but it was all about how he created the business. Then my first initial store manager by the name of Anthony Burling, wherever Anthony is these days, I don't really know. But he was so good at creating a sales team, training the sales team. So you would get a personality, which is ultimately what we would hire, would be personalities. Then you would give them the tools to be able to make a sale, because Michael Hill is a very sales-driven business, like no other retailer. By far, hands down, they were the best retailer going around, whether it was clothes, sporting goods, or luxury goods. So he taught me, one, how to notice a personality, train the personality, and then look after them. So create a relationship that they would walk over hot coals for you. So he was my very first mentor. I think I spent 18 months with him before I got my first store when I was like 22, which was unheard of.
What did he teach you? How to foster that relationship?
Yeah, how to find someone in an interview.
Yeah.
How to train someone on a sales point of view with the company's guidelines, and then how to keep that relationship going.
Yeah.
To get the most out of that person.
What were like some very valuable things that you learned from him in specific? Like maybe just a few tips that you learned from him that were invaluable to you.
Sure. So it all, for me as a staff member, the biggest thing I learnt off him was all about trust. So if your staff members don't trust you, then they won't do anything for you. So example, if you are biased, so our sales team were anywhere from 5 to 15 staff, depending on the size of your store. And then if you had a bias to one person, then clearly the other staff members would notice that. So you had to be very diplomatic on how you played the team. But if you didn't have their trust, you promised them something and you broke that trust, they would not be able to make a sale. They would not be able to take instructions to maximize a sale because they just don't trust you.
Yeah, right. So I guess that becomes a part of, I think about the word integrity here a lot. If you said the word, if you promised something and then couldn't follow through with it, that would be not being integral. So do you think it's probably worthwhile, rather than promising things quickly, putting things aside until you're ready to actually offer something?
100%. If you can't answer someone's question, we were always instructed to say these words, which was, that's a really good question. I don't have an answer for that. I'll get back to you. But the key to it is, go and find the information and then come back to that person.
So you'd say that, but then your job was to go and find that information and come back and answer the question.
100%.
And that would build trust.
Yeah, of course, because you're helping someone else out. And no one ever knew everything, ever. Doesn't matter what business you're in, but I always would use that. That's a really good question. Don't have the answer. I'm going to come back to you. And you would use it with customers as well. And the word that you use, integral or integrity, if that's all you had, that's all a person ever has in life is their word, being integral, being honest, being trustworthy. So I like to try and instill those attributes into the two kids. Yeah.
So they've become values that you learn through business that you now actually try and teach to your own children.
Yeah, of course. And you've met the two kids.
Yeah, lovely.
So, yeah, I think they're great,
absolutely lovely.
Great kids.
Yeah.
Ivy doesn't talk an awful lot. Xavier talks your ear off. But this is that legacy part. If you've got to leave something in life, they're the only two things I've really got, ultimately. And it's funny, we live in the East End of Newcastle, and as we've been there for 3 or 4 years now, my son would know more people, because he surfs everywhere from, the harbour to Newcastle and everywhere in between. Like, I'd be walking down the street and 50, 60-year-old man goes, "Oh, are you Xavier Prest, Dad?" And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I am." And I wouldn't even know him. Outside of the guys from the Hole and a few guys from Newcastle. And they'd come up and say, "Oh, he's a great kid, really love him, he's awesome, he loves to have a chat." And I'm like, "Oh, job done. The kid's good." The kid's good, so that's all you need as a father.
Wow. I guess this wasn't really one of my questions, but just a little side one. I had a guy yesterday who just started his fathering journey. If you could give him any advice on what were some hot tips for you being a dad, like what are some things you learned from being a dad that have helped you out?
Yeah, sure.
What do you reckon would be like, and not just him, like think of like we got Blackie. We've got probably a lot of us looking at potentially starting families and stuff soon. What's your top tips for people starting their families? For people starting, having kids?
So my father, I'll take a step back. My dad was a greenkeeper. So cricket pitches, golf courses, all of that. So he would go to work super early, like we're all still asleep. He'd go to work at 4:30. He'd always be home for breakfast. So he'd go to work, do a couple of hours, and then he'd come back. And he'd either make us breakfast or take us to school. But then he'd have the advantage of knocking off early as well. So he'd be home by 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. So we get home at 3:30. He would always go for a run with my sister, come and hit golf balls with me, kick the footy with my brother. So I look at my brother, who's a father of 2, and then I look at myself, and we are literally the same as what my father was. So we were always there for the kids. So if you have a job that is flexible enough to be there, especially so kids, females and males grow in 7-year blocks, if you didn't know that. So from 0 to 7, they need their mum. 7 to 14, they need their dad. And from 14 to 21, it's peers, footy coaches, netball coaches, etc., because they don't want to hang around with mum and dad when they're 14 through to 21.
Gotcha.
So they are the growing stages of kids. So if you can be around and really present with your kids, you will have the best relationships.
Okay.
That's my word.
Be around, be present.
100%. Like I used to play dolls with Ivy from whenever she was interested in them.
Yeah.
I know, don't want to bag out their ex-wife, but she would never do that stuff. I would be the one playing dolls with Ivy, or letting her paint my face or cut my nails or paint my nails.
Yeah. See, I've learned that as a teacher. It's like, and, not just teacher, but like camp worker as well over the years. Whatever game's being played, that's what needs to be played, because that's where kids learn everything that they learn.
Exactly.
Literally everything they learn comes through a game. And to have someone who's like, yeah, I'll play that game, and lean right into it, that shows them how to lean into the game that's being played as well.
Yep.
Just being there and showing that you're willing to get engaged. You're not like afraid of it.
Yeah, exactly right. Like Xavier went through and is still in this phase of fishing, but prior to hooking up with all his mates, going fishing from, 12 to now, I had to go fishing. And I hated and still do hate fucking fishing. But you know what? I'm on Google, I'm on YouTube working out how to catch whiting, catch flatheads, how to do the right bait for flathead and whiting and all of that. But I hated it. But as a father, like you said, that's the game that needed to be played. He wanted to go fishing, we're going fishing.
Yeah. Okay. And then that that actually fosters them going through. Oh, you've just made me think of something. Your kids have gone to a Steiner school.
Yeah, that's right.
Why?
Because
I want to know more about that. It's just popping up for me.
So being a teacher, as you are, my ex was a primary school teacher. And when we had kids, she said, I don't want to send the kids to a mainstream school and be stuck in this factory of kids. I said, okay, what's the alternative? And I knew there was homeschooling, and that was a possibility due to me working the job that I was working and her being a school teacher. It still takes a lot of resources to get that right. And she said, no, here's an alternative to a mainstream school. And I went, okay, let's go and have a look. So we went along and had a look at the school. I'm like, oh, this is a pretty cool school. There's kids there were hammocks strung up between trees. The kids are all laying in these hammocks. Just looked like an ideal schooling environment. And the kids have been there for, Xavier's 16, so he's been there for 9 years. Ivy's been there, she's 13, so she's been there for the 5 years or so. So it's just a different way of teaching. The kids get there in the long run. This primary from kindergarten to year 6, I would say, is just so beautiful for the kids to be taught at. If you don't want your kid coming home in year 1 and got homework, the pressure of that as a 7-year-old would be, I don't even know what it would feel like you got homework as a 7-year-old. My daughter still doesn't have homework as a year 7 student. She might have 5 minutes of something and she'll do it and that's it.
Yeah.
But it's just the environment, the way they teach kindergarten to year 6 is very different.
What does it teach kids to be like is my main question.
Sure. So very independent. So the kids are very independent. They're very in tune with what's going on in the world. So when I say what's going on in the world, I don't mean mainstream media. I mean just in general. Like my son went away for 3 weeks camping in Central Australia 2 weeks ago. So they had to pitch the tent, they had to pull it down, they had to cook their own food for the group of 15, 20 kids and teachers.
Yeah.
And I have some mainstream teachers, and he went on a sabbatical for 12 months and took the kids down to his kids down to Tasmania and put them from a mainstream school into a Steiner school, and they were like 14, 15. One of them did really badly. He just went, man, I can't work in this environment. And then the other one was loving it.
Yeah, right.
And he would help out. He would go on these 1 week, 2 week camping trips. And he's like, these Steiner kids shit all over mainstream kids. They're like, they know how to pitch a tent, cook food, like pull a tent down, how to organise the bus.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. It's just, they're not, you've met the 2 kids. They're worldly enough to know that it's not just the Steiner school, because you can get engrossed in it. And I feel some kids in the Steiner system would come out and just be oblivious to what the real world would be.
Yeah, right.
Because as soon as you remove school, you have to step into the real world. So I think there's a balance. But from K to 6, it's a beautiful little school. And 7 to 12 is great as well. I just feel the younger years are very, very different to a regular school.
Okay, so maybe like something like K to 6 for your kids when in Steiner, and then switch them over to maybe a public high school when they're older and they've learnt those skills in there in formative years.
Yeah, 100%. I still think there's key times to move the kids out of school. So to be probably year 7, starting year 7 and starting year 9, because then you're maturing, you're going through puberty, all of that. So it's definitely been a good school for the 2 kids.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks for that. It's a little side tangent, but something I'm getting more curious about.
You do really well as a teacher at Steiner, just quietly.
I've thought about that before.
Yeah. I could introduce you to a couple of the key teachers.
Yeah.
They'd love you.
Yeah.
Because you would fit in, I feel you would fit in really well.
Yeah?
Yeah, easy.
Brilliant. All right,
well, Matt, Matty, body surfer Matty, tall Matty.
Yeah.
He's sending his daughter there next year.
There you go. All right, well, we'll have to talk more about that one.
I think we chatted in the surf quite a lot about that, and then I knew there were some open days.
Yeah.
So Matty took his daughter along.
Yeah, I'd love an intro. That'd be brilliant. Speaking of intros, this probably feels like the perfect time to ask this question. Who's a mentor that you know that would be someone that's great to interview on Between Views? Someone you think that I should know?
Sure. So not necessarily a mentor. I would have mentored him. However, I feel in business world, he's far surpassed me now. So 35, Steve passed up, and he worked underneath me for a period of time when I was running New South Wales, and he now has a $10 million business selling neon signs, and the name of the business is Kings of Neon.
Oh, right.
And
You linked me up with him already.
Did I?
Yeah, remember when I was doing Zephyrus Coffee Roasters, you got me a link up with him, and I was selling him beans.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so we had the beans in
Yeah.
the office. So he's gone from like doing $2 million and he's now doing close to 10 million.
Wow.
Mm.
And those are some brilliant signs. Actually, that would be fascinating to talk to him.
Yeah, it's an amazing person.
Yeah.
And just taking the business world and life by the throat
Yeah.
and squeezing the most out of it.
Brilliant.
But
Okay.
$10 million in my eyes, is a big business.
Oh, yeah.
Even if you're netting out, say, 10% of that,
Yeah.
that's a lot of cash.
Right.
Mm.
100%.
So Steve Past is your man, and you've already got
And I've already sold him coffee.
you already got an in.
Yeah. Hey, man, remember when I sold you coffee a time ago? That was
You
good,
know
right?
what? And he does speaking engagements and podcasts already. So
Does he?
yeah, he's very, very astute in this sort of communication.
Brilliant. All right. Well, I'll keep him right in mind. We'll talk about that later. I guess the final part with mentors is, things that aren't people can be mentors. Moments, information, books, things that you just learn this vital information from. Do you have anything like that has been really important to you in your journey in life?
Yes, I do, and it's still related to people, to a person or people or the human race. However, it's more, for me, the drive of a sportsman. So if you looked at my library, it would be just made up of autobiographies of famous sportsmen. And then there's always something that makes that sportsman or sportswomen amazing. So everybody's got a story. For example, I've just told mine. And the drive that I have, couldn't be a professional sportsman. So, you know what? Fuck it. I'll be the best business person I could. And did that for Michael Hill for a long time. And now I'm chasing that dream, whether it's Three Fingers Inc. or the NDIS business that I have. But there's always something that drives those sportsmen, whether it was a coach, single mother, single father. There's always something that's driving those sportsmen to be elite. So that's probably my mentors would be pretty much that. Just reading lots of autobiographies. I find business autobiographies a little bit boring because I can relate to sportsmen a lot more.
Right. Anyone in particular?
Actually, there's Wayne Carey, who's a famous North Melbourne football great until he slept with his captain's wife. And he fell from the top all the way to the bottom. But his drive was he was from a small country town not far from where I was born. And his father was an alcoholic. He lived with his mum, and football was his escape from his father because he was abusive, drunk as well. There was like 4 or 5 kids in the family, and he used to beat them all up, plus the mother. And then the mother ran away with the kids, and he went, and that was his drive, I imagine. And he's an angry football player, and that come out on the footy field, but it come out in a good way.
Channeled it well.
Yeah, channeled it really well, that he was just an amazing footballer until he had his indiscretions. And
yeah, right. Came out later.
I still think he has indiscretions, even because he'd have to be 52, 53.
Brilliant. All right. So much information. I'm loving it all.
Sure.
I always loved listening
Happy to
back.
please.
I'm enjoying every moment of this. It's been actually a very relaxing conversation that don't always go like this.
Free flowing.
Free flowing. And that brings us pretty well to the end. There's 2 little questions left, and that's always the same way we finish the show. This is our continuity piece. You're going to answer the last guest question. The last guest is Benji from Earthen Rhythms. He is a African drum teaching facilitator, and he has run a business teaching African drumming for the last 20 years, and he's doing a great job at it. And his question for you was...
What's your recipe for your own personal sustainability?
That's a good question. So my recipe for my sustainability is I'm fortunate enough to have alone time without my kids while they're at their mother's place. So one, try to lead as healthy lifestyle as I possibly can. So my body is deteriorating faster than what a 2-legged person would. So I try to maintain a reasonably healthy lifestyle, and then the me time, which is what everybody refers to, which is where I catch up with you guys at the beach all the time, that is my sustainability. So if I can maintain a healthy body and then get in the water to maintain a healthy mind, then that would be my answer to his question.
Taking on a holistic approach to health.
Hey, don't get me wrong, I have the odd blowout and bender like
true.
Everybody else, but
that's okay.
Instead of being every weekend, it's probably once every 6 months.
Yeah, and that's
very, very conscious of that, especially with a teenage boy around.
Oh, true,
and
100%.
A teenage girl.
Because you're modelling how to be now.
That's right. I have 0 alcohol in the house. Yeah. So never, ever. Xavier's like, Dad, you must be the only male in Australia that has none. So I don't drink during the week.
We don't keep in the house.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Good.
Right now, actually, that's a total lie because I had my birthday party a little while ago and there's just excess, which is very untypical. But either way, typically it's not the case.
Yeah. So that's the sustainability. Like I'd like to see, so Xavier's 16, let's say he has a kid in the next 15 years. That makes me 65. I definitely don't want to be in a wheelchair. I want to, once the kids are another 5 years or so, I'd like to pursue my dream of sailing around the world.
That's your dream.
So I can't do that unless I'm physically fit. So
I might have a, I don't know if your dream can go in little parts or if you want to practice it at all, but in the next few years, I might have a good link up for you.
Oh, good.
Watch this space. And then to finish it all up and right on 88 minutes, 2 minutes left, as it usually runs for about 90 minutes.
Perfect.
Can you please leave a question for the next guest? You don't know who they are. I can't tell you who they are. It's just, I like that it's mystery. It goes to the ether. It could be anyone, literally.
Okay. So my question to the next person being interviewed would be, what life decision would you change if you could change it?
What life decision would you change if you could change it? We should put in a bar as well. They have to answer it.
Yeah, of course.
You can't do the old cop out. Oh, I'll live with my regrets, that kind of thing.
No, of course. Got to answer it.
That's right. You got to answer the question.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, brilliant. Well, that brings us to the end of our time today. One thing I always thank people for is their time because, as you probably have come to understand, it's probably the most valuable currency we actually have. And I really am grateful that you have taken 2 hours out of your time today to come and sit down with me and teach me more about life and more about what can happen in life and be a mentor for me and teach me. So I appreciate you being here and I'm very thankful for that. So Grant, thank you for coming onto Between Views.
Happy to help out. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the final part of our interview with Grant. Next week, we have a new guest on Between Views. We will be speaking with Dominic Vivaldia about world-famous body surfing break Point Panic. his impressive and inspirational weight loss journey, and also his passion for film and photography. This will be released next Monday. Next, if you are one of our regular listeners, or even if you're new here, I'd like to invite you to leave a star rating for us on Spotify, Apple Music, or hit subscribe on YouTube, since you made it this far. This genuinely helps us to get discovered by new listeners and would be epic if you could help us out. Thirdly, Between Views is opening its Patreon community and members are coming in. If you would like to join the community and receive exclusive weekly updates and ideas and have a say in the direction of Between Views, then you can check it out at patreon.com/betweenviews. In other news, Between Views is always looking for collaborators. If you want to join the team or create something together, then please reach out on Instagram. Finally, if you know someone who deserves to be interviewed or just have some feedback or questions, then send us an email at betweenviewsbv@gmail.com or message us on Instagram. Thanks again and see you soon. Between Views.